Welcome to the Rock Guitar Confidential Podcast with Ryan and Scott. Hey, is it possible to age gracefully in rock? We'll find out next. You know, I don't care whether you're an actor or a comedian or a musician or a dancer, whatever it might be. If you're in the arts, even a freaking painter, it's like it's not easy to age gracefully. Like, how do you age? Especially I feel terrible for like actresses. Like if you're like say a 26-year-old like beautiful actress, right?
Oh yeah,
you got like maybe 5-6 more years before you start getting into the mom roles.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that. I guess I just...
Not anything wrong with mom roles. I'm just saying, like, you aren't going to be the leading lady after, like, 30.
Not at all. Kirsten Dunst, I hope I'm saying her name.
Spider-Man actress, right? Yep.
Yeah. The little girl from Interview with the Vampire, right?
It's so funny how you and I think of her as the girl from Spider-Man. You think of her as the girl from Interview with the Vampire.
Of course. That's a great role. And she's actually going to be in Alex Garland's upcoming film, Civil War.
Oh, yeah. It's the A24 thing. I've heard about this.
Right. Alex Garland is the writer of Ex Machina, Annihilation, and Men. 3 movies that everybody should go see.
Talented filmmaker, for sure.
Yeah, great filmmaker, great writer. So she was recently talking about how, she only gets mom roles these days.
Yeah.
I think her quote was something, I'm still paraphrasing, but it was something along the lines of, everybody wants me to play the sad mom.
Yeah. Well, she's got to be probably early 40s now, I'm guessing, like 42-ish, probably.
Probably like early 40s, I'm guessing. Yeah.
Still beautiful. I mean, it's not like she's not, but it's like, that is true. I mean, if you're a mid-40s actress, you're going to be playing moms or grandmas, depending on your late 40s. You know what I mean? It's like, that's basically what it is. And then for actors, it's a little bit more, we just saw an 80-year-old Indiana Jones last year. You know what I mean? So it's like one of those things where you have a lot more like runway if you're an actor. You know what I mean?
Well, to be fair, I skipped that movie, so I did not see an 84 old.
What I'm trying to say is that if you're an actor, you have a longer runway. You can keep going for 60s, 70s. You'll still get big action. Freaking Schwarzenegger still does action movies and stuff. He's like 78 years old. You know what I mean? I guess what I'm trying to say is like you can keep doing that for a long time. Whereas if you're a woman, it seems like that's not. I mean, unless you're playing like a British dame or something like
I'd give
Helen Mirren or something.
Helen Mirren. Yeah. You just totally took the name out of.
But that's like you kind of have one, like you can play aristocratic royalty if you're British.
Right. So some of that is
or a hardened Southern woman, like in the Dust Bowl or something. That's like what she can do. She's 40. Make her a hardened Southern woman in the Dust Bowl.
So some of that's double standards in terms of gender, of course,
sure,
right? Cultural double standards.
Now, if you bring it to our world, the music world, then obviously that holds true almost across the board too. So, men can sort of be, there's the sort of Scorpions are like all pushing 80 now and are still doing it. But, if you're a woman and you're in rock, you have to be like a beautiful woman, like got to be beautiful, got to have, be.
There's a look. Yeah, exactly. Historically, there has been a look.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Whereas, and then it's not to say that isn't true for men too. You have to be cool looking dude.
Yeah, dude, they're totally same thing.
But it's like it's this. As soon as you start showing any sign of age, and you can't be allowed to age, that's the thing that it's a weird thing.
Yep.
Rock and roll is in a weird spot though right now because rock and roll, as we've talked about in this podcast many times, is not the music of the youth. This is something that's like people who are middle aged and older are really the ones still holding the flame for rock and roll at this point. And there's like a few younger people who are into it, but it's like not the masses. You know what I mean?
So we should probably announce today's topic.
Yes. Which go ahead, Ryan. You.
All right. So today's topic is aging gracefully in rock.
Yep. And this is something that I think it really affects all rock artists, like across all levels of doing rock. So if you're like an international touring band all the way down to like a mid-level kind of opening band, a club band, even YouTubers, stuff like that, whatever it might be, whatever way you're expressing yourself in rock music, how do you do that in a way that it feels like it's still dignified?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Wholeheartedly agree.
That's a challenge. We were just talking about like bar bands and stuff like that. Like, if you're a bar band and you're playing covers or something like that. And we just saw a picture a minute ago of, a classic. It happens across the entire, I'm sure it happens all over the world.
Oh,
there's a band playing probably 3 sets of covers and there's like 4 people in the whole bar. How do you hold your head up high as the front person or the lead guitarist of that band, knowing that you're playing essentially to the people who are in that band or who that bar? That's it. There's like the people who work there and like 3 other people who are drunks on a Thursday night. You know what I mean? They're just hanging out. You know what I mean? And
so that I don't. I feel like, how do I put this? You know, if a person is too overcommitted to the gig, like in quotation marks, the gig.
You say a person like an artist, a musician, a band.
Yeah, like imagine you met this person and you were like, you just found out, hey, you play guitar, and he's like, yeah, dude, I just man, it's all about the gig, man. I love going out and playing the gig.
Well, there's nothing wrong with loving to play the music. That's fine. I think that the challenge is, you know, it is a hard thing. I've been in situations in a band where you're playing in a relatively empty room, and every musician, I don't care who you are, you've been in that situation.
Dude, I've done it. Yeah, everyone's done it.
It's there's not a single musician who hasn't played to an empty room. It's just what happens. But it's like you have to find other things in your head. You have to find a way to sort of like make it so that it feels dignified. You can still put on a good performance, even there's only like 4 people there to see it. You know, you don't want to like phone it in, like fuck it, there's nobody here, who cares? You know what I mean? That you can't be that guy either. But then that brings up the argument that you were just saying, like, why do the show if it's not doing anything for you? Wouldn't it be better just to spend the time rehearsing and honing your stuff, getting it really tight, so that when you have a really good opportunity to play, you can go out and nail it, as opposed to just going out and playing for nobody. You know what I mean?
And if we're talking about that bar gig, right? It's not paying jack. I mean, it's not paying.
Yeah, the question is, why do it? Like, what's the purpose? What is it doing for you? How's it pushing you forward in a positive way? Like, how's it making your music? You know, especially if you're playing covers. Like, you have to also be like, why are you doing covers? Like, why are you doing this band in the first place? Like, what's the purpose of this?
Right?
Is it to get better gigs? If that's the case, then you'd be better served by honing your stuff and then showcasing for people who might hire you for private parties or something like that. That's, to me, a better use of your time and energy than just going out and playing a random club gig at like on a Friday night. You know what I mean?
So I always had a criteria. It had to be, you know, one or all or some combination of these 3 things, right? I've either got to be making money, learning something, or having fun, right? It could be just one of those things, but it can't be none of those things.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So and they're all related.
Trifecta. Yeah, exactly.
Right. You know, so like, hey, making money is in and of itself having fun. Although you could make money while not having fun in a band, right? Yep. You play a bunch of songs you really don't give a shit about.
I'm pretty sure that Jonathan Cain's in that situation, or Neil Schon.
You think Neil Schon is
depending on who's making each other most miserable?
Oh.
You know, because I know they hate each other, but they have like contractually they have to play together.
I think you just described the kinks.
They literally were suing each other, and then they had to be, while they're suing each other, playing shows together.
the Davies brothers, right?
That seems pretty bad to me.
Yeah. So there's that, you know, or you could just be having fun, right? I've been in bands where
playing with some friends.
You know, everybody I was playing with was like top level musician, right? Like, I was not the most experienced or skillful so I also learned a lot in that kind of situation.
It's a good band to be into, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get better at tennis, you let Andre Agassi kick your ass.
Yeah, and then go do some meth with him, because apparently he was doing lots of meth back in the day.
Of course he was. Really?
Yeah, really. Apparently he was like totally hooked on meth for like years. Yeah,
like during his tennis career.
Yeah, the end of his tennis career.
He was like buying it from Lance Armstrong.
I assume so, but yeah, I mean, he was having fun though. Give him that.
Okay, well, nice. I don't remember seeing him like. Well, I mean, I guess
he found a cure for tooth and mouth disease.
I was gonna say, well, I guess when you're like grunting when you hit the tennis ball, you don't have time to grind your teeth.
Maybe you find time. I don't know. But no, it's funny. I think that we've talked about this on the podcast before, but every musician has to figure out why they're doing it. Like, why are you doing this? Like, why are you playing this gig? Why are you in this band? What's the purpose of where are you going with this? You know what I mean?
I just think there's a trap that some middle-aged dudes fall into where they just need to go gig.
Yeah,
well, even using the word gig,
I feel like that's actually coming from like an old school way of looking at being in a band. Like, if you're a musician, you play gigs. And back in the day, I think another thing that people who are middle-aged are missing is that there really isn't a vibrant like club scene anywhere for rock music anymore. There's not real. There's the national touring bands, and then there's not really like a vibrant scene anywhere. That's like, okay, this is an awesome. Like back in the '80s, there was an awesome club scene. Even in Sacramento is an awesome club scene. There's an awesome club scene in San Francisco, awesome club scene down in LA. There's obviously LA's famous awesome club scene. Even in New York had awesome club scenes. You know what I mean? That was a very '80s, '90s thing. And then in the '90s, it kind of morphed into like a pop punk sort of surfer, like kind of
the Blink-182
hardcore, kind of thing. That became more like that. But really, at the end of the '90s, that kind of ended. There wasn't really the club thing really kind of ended at that point. And there was a bunch of bands still playing, but I can tell you from experience, playing around with my band in different club situations, it was never like a vibrant scene ever again. There's the college scene. If you're in a certain kind of band, you can play college places and go play at like pubs and parties and things like that. That if you're an original.
I think stand-up comedy is also like that too. There's the college scene, and then there's there's also I'd love to have a stand-up comedian on here sometime, because I think there may still be a more vibrant comedy scene.
It's this fraught though nowadays. I mean, because it's really hard to have like edgy humor or transgressive humor because everyone feels offended about everything.
So here's the thing though too. Like you could just be like a middle-aged like dude, because I'm saying
and be offensive.
Well, and still carve out a role as a comedian. You can be self-deprecating. You can do observational comedy.
Almost all the best comics are middle-aged dudes. You know what I mean? You got the scars to be funny.
But if you're playing rock, like the trick is you can't be the joke.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I mean, who's to say what the joke is anymore, though? I mean, there's not really a scene of any kind to be part of. You know what I mean? So my bread and butter with X Aegis, we're still pretty new to the scene. We've just kind of we got our first record out. We're just getting our feet wet.
Right, promoting that, writing.
And then your experience has been some original bands and some cover bands. And my experience has been mostly original bands. I've only pretty much played in original bands in my live playing performance career. So for when I was doing The Morning After, when I was in that band, it was much more like the college scene. We're very much a college kind of band.
Now, was that a cover band or original?
It was mostly original. We did some covers though. It was like 60-40, I would say.
Okay.
So it was like 60% our stuff and then 40%. We were kind of in the vein of Matchbox 20 meets Dave Matthews. That was that band. That's
so glad you survived, dude.
It was awesome, actually. It was great, dude. It was really cool. Anyway, we did that for a few years. We were playing parties and like we do like Borders books and stuff. And
I remember books.
There's Borders bookstores were these stores where they actually have bands come and play, and so we would go play there.
Whoa, there were bands and there were also books.
Exactly, it's
whoa,
it's amazing. And then we'd also play college bars and we'd go play parties and stuff. And we played at like coffee houses and kind of all the places you turn on Friends and imagine like a pop band playing at the party. That's kind of what we were. We were like, well, this is like 2000, 2001. We were like, it was like a while back. So I was in my mid 20s.
That's the show where like on the last episode, Phoebe wakes up on a park bench and then looks inside Central Perk and realizes the whole show has just been her drug-addled dream, and she's actually a homeless.
I don't think I ever saw the last episode of Friends. I'll be honest with you. But anyway, that was what we were. So that was that, and then but most of my experience playing live has been with my solo band Scott Allen Project, and our bread and butter has always been doing opening slots for national touring.
Right.
So that's kind of what we've always done, because we're unique in the sense that we're like the only like virtuoso guitar band anywhere in this area. Yeah. So we've done shows with all these great people, and that's been kind of if I'm going to do a show, I'd rather do like one show every 3 months or every 4 months and have it really count, like I do opening for Steve Morse.
Well, and that kind of gig too, which is what I envision for X Aegis.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So there's a.
But the way I've kind of fought the dignified part of it is by being, this is going to sound very, very egotistical, but being fucking awesome.
You are fucking awesome,
that's
dude.
going out there and just really throwing it down and like blowing people's faces off. You know what I mean? Not anyone who's going to walk out of thinking that guy can't play guitar.
Dude, and that's the truth, man. Your shows are great.
And so it's one of those things where you kind of, there's no, I'm not 20 anymore, but it's also I can do this. Yeah,
it's kind of akin to the it's kind of akin to the Steve Martin be so good they can't ignore you.
Exactly. No one's gonna be able to say shit. You know what I mean about that? You know what I mean? But they may not dig my music. I had one guy come up to me after a show one time. He's like, I gotta say, man, you're really great. I don't think I'd ever buy your music, but I was like, well, I'm glad you came over to say that to me. That's really nice. I guess. You thought, do you find my music enough to come over and insult me?
I had somebody at a gig. Like and this is in like the last like 5 years, so like relatively recently. Say, man, dude, what you're doing is great. It's a dying art form, man.
You have all the dying animals
oh,
on a
thanks.
sun-scorched hellscape. You guys are still hanging in there.
Man, it's a dying art form, man. You're great.
Hey, well, that really does speak to something, though. I mean, there's a thing that people our age, because we grew up in a time when there was like a vibrant club scene, and if you're happening in a band, you would go gig because there's a lot of people who show up at gigs just to see the bands. Like, who are these new bands? That doesn't exist anymore. That stopped existing in the late 90s. That actually hasn't been a thing for a while. You go to a club, it's wherever people you can drag out to that club. If you're lucky enough to build enough of an audience that they'll come and see you, that kind of thing. But you're not talking about there's like 100 people, 200 people show up every weekend just to see the bands.
Right.
That doesn't happen anymore.
That's right.
You know what I mean? And that was a thing back in the 80s and early 90s, mid 90s. Not a thing anymore.
Right.
And so I think that's sort of that mindset that people still are dragging from that time period into this time period, saying, oh, we got to go do the gig. It's like, well,
yep. And you know what constitutes a quote unquote gig?
I guess playing in front of people.
I guess, man. Well, I think it goes something like this. The bar is going to let you and your hobbyist friends come play for like 2 hours because they're not going to be as busy as they want to be. And they know that you and
we'll buy drinks.
You'll buy drinks. and like the handful of friends that are going to
come and see,
be nice enough to come out, they're all going to buy at least one drink.
Yep.
And, you guys probably aren't being paid squat.
Yeah. Or anything. Maybe he'll give you a free drink.
Maybe. And when I say squat, I mean like $300 for 3 hours. Split between
super lucky to get that. Are you kidding me?
Right, I know.
Like
probably
like
on the high end,
and
man.
a couple free drinks. You know what I mean? That's if you're lucky. You know what I mean?
So I think the world is saturated with that. Right?
Yeah. I don't even think some of those bands aren't even terrible. It's just a situation where like it's just unnecessary. I guess at the end of the day, like nobody's really being served in that scenario. The people who are walking in the bar,
that's what I fear.
aren't doing that. You're not yourself being served. It's not like you're playing to a rabid audience who can't wait for the next note. It really is. It's just something that's it's more like scratching an itch you feel like you have to scratch because you have to say I played a gig last night. That's kind of what it is. You know what I mean? And
that's kind of so.
I think that's what it is. I think more so than anything else. You know what I mean? I want to play a gig. Some of them can be cool. I mean, some of those gigs might be cool. You know what I mean? And some of the gigs, might be terrible. Like and I think, like I said, everybody in the world's done played empty rooms.
Yeah,
it's not.
No doubt.
It's not. There's no shame.
Yep.
That's part of the process of
totally
being a musician.
Yep.
It's just about being more selective about what gigs you do and don't do. You know what I mean? And then what is I think to me, like the same with X Aegis and with Scott Allen Project too, I always think like, what's the purpose of this? Why are we doing this?
Exactly.
What are we getting out of doing this? Like what's the value?
What is the benefit?
Yeah.
Yep. Especially since, it's, speaking just for, X Aegis, right? What it will take for that to be the experience it needs to be, it's going to require a certain kind of and amount of preparation.
Yep.
So.
And this right kind of shows. And the only way that really have quote unquote gigs is to be able to get promoters to offer you guarantees to come and play their clubs. That's basically, where the gig, that's a real gig.
That's a real gig.
Yeah. You know what I mean? That's what it is. You know what I mean? So, and that's, you have to have some certain amount of footprint, whether it be locally, regionally, or nationally, or internationally, depending on what kind of band you are. There's got to be enough people who want to see you. There's a lot of bands everyone talks about and loves that don't tour, and they go, God, why isn't that band touring? It's like, well, because there's just not enough of an audience for a promoter to take a chance and book them. Because when a promoter books a band, they're out that money no matter what. The band's getting paid to come do that gig, so they have to make sure that they can recoup that money and make some profit. That's how business works. Wait, I gotta make profit? Wait, no, wait. I thought this is just So that's the whole purpose of everything. So you're better spent. You'd be better off making sure your live show is great and doing all the promotion in the world with all the avenues you have now to try and build an audience who will be there for you. Then when you come in, your live show is ready to go. You're ready to kick ass at live. That's the way to do it. Especially if you're a newer artist. And it's funny though, there really isn't that many like very successful newer artists. Most of the newer artists who are kind of hitting the scene and having a lot of success are bands from 15 years ago, 10 years ago, who were able to get a little bit of a leg up, whether it be through promoters kind of taking a chance on them regionally, or through a label who's willing to kind of help them get some radio, or paying a lot of money out of pocket to open for other bands. Like that's a thing. Like if you have to do what's called a buy on. Like if there's a certain band touring, if your band wants to open for them, you can buy on. So you're basically paying that band to open for them.
Wow,
that kind of thing. And that's a thing. That's a big thing. It's the way a lot of bands do it.
Play,
that's the way a lot of bands do that now. And that's one of those things where is that even, because that's the thing you have to then ask, am I actually a professional musician? I'm basically paying them to go open for them. I'm not even making any money doing this.
Right.
How sustainable is that as a business plan? You know,
Not at all.
It's like any business. If you start like a bakery, let's say, you should plan, I'm not going to make a profit for 2 years.
Yep.
So if you have the finances to go and do that and realize I'm going to be putting all this time and energy into this band and I'm not going to make a profit for 2 years, you better be able to do that. You know what I mean?
Right.
You better not have a lot of overhead. You better have like 3 kids and a mortgage or something like that.
Your plan has to be bulletproof.
Yeah, you have to be like, I'm single. I just was staying with friends, and I'm just renting a room or something like that. And I'm going to go on the road for 2 years, and I got to be able to say I'm not going to make any money, and I'm going to take on this debt or whatever I end up having to do those shows.
Yep.
Then to me, it's the same question: like, what am I getting from this? What's the benefit? What's coming back to me from that? Is that going to lead me to having an opportunity to actually have paying gigs on my own going in the future? And if you think it is, then it's probably worth doing. If you feel like it's just taking a shot, man, then it's almost like going and getting a loan for your college. It's the same thing. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, all right, now I got no money and $50,000 in debt. Sweet.
So I think the word, I think the word gig needs to be kind of like largely retired from for most people then, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If it's a real, if it's a real gig, that's what a gig is.
Yeah. Just because you're playing at a bar doesn't necessarily mean it's a gig. You know what I mean?
Because I think that's where
it can mean that. It can mean that, but
that's where I feel like I think it gets a little. It can become, not always for everybody, but in some cases it can become a little undignified.
Yeah, because you think like, oh my God, in your mind you're the coolest dude ever playing the coolest thing ever, and then you look at the video of the concert later on and you realize, oh, there's only like 4 people there. It looks weird. There's like us on stage and there's like a couple people wandering around, and you're like going, I thought that was a lot cooler than that.
Yeah,
because in your mind I'm at Wembley Stadium, that kind of thing. And
there's a certain I think that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah,
right?
I know what you mean. Yeah.
So it's important to me as I age that I'm never that guy.
I thought you agreed that you weren't going to age. I thought that was
not emotionally, Scott.
I thought isn't there like a picture in the attic that's got like it's aging for you, right? That's how it works.
Oh yeah, the picture of Dorian Gray.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or like King Diamond's Fatal Portrait album.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, that's right. I have to bring it back to
of course,
King Diamond. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So I know that speaking for myself personally, I'm always wary of what's dignified for me to be doing and promoting.
Well, that really is going to depend on the person. Who every person's idea of what that is, and I don't know. My kind of feeling on that's always been I'm going to do whatever I want, and if you don't like it, you can go fuck yourself.
Thanks for listening to Rock Guitar Confidential with Scott and Ryan. Please make sure to rate, review, and subscribe. Now, back to the show. Well, no, I mean,
your opinion is kind of like your opinion, and it means nothing to me.
I'm speaking total harmony with that, right?
Yeah,
because
exactly.
I know that I wouldn't be happy hauling all of my gear to
exactly
like Krusty's Dive Bar to
unless it was a situation where, like, I've had shows like this before where I'll book something and it's like I just treat it like a rehearsal. Like we're just going to go and we're just going to play for an hour and we're just going to really treat it like a rehearsal because I know it's not going to be a highly attended show. We're just going to go do this. And
I used to call that paid rehearsal, but keyword on paid.
Well, maybe you'll sell a couple CDs or something, but it's like one of those things you kind of just you have to recognize. And there's all kinds of situations, especially if you're not playing like mainstream style music. Although what's I guess is great. One of the things that's great now is there is no mainstream anymore. There's nothing you can do that's mainstream. You basically, and then this is another thing I want to kind of bring up is that when I hear people who have that sort of gig first mentality, like a gig, and to myself,
it's all about the gig.
I'm kind of guilty. It's like, dude, are you writing tunes? Are you releasing records? Are you doing anything like that? That's kind of what I think is what real. Yeah. I really have to kind of slap back and go, wait, that's actually also an old school way of looking at it because all the new guitar quote unquote heroes are all YouTubers. They're all dudes who just make videos and edit all day.
There's no gigs for them at all.
Yeah, there's need to be a gig because they're reaching millions of people on the internet. That's way better. That's like doing 1,000 gigs. You know what I mean? To do that. So that's kind of the new what a gig is doing like a YouTube channel and doing it well. That's the next thing.
Right.
All the big people that
of course it's not live, and so you can
look at someone like
the quality of it, but
like someone like Tim Henson from Polyphia, is probably making more money on his YouTube channel than he is with Polyphia. He's more of a YouTuber star than he is a musician per se. Well, he's a great musician.
Steve Cherryberry kills it. I mean, he's also kind of a comedian.
Yeah, and Fluff, Fluff, like the riffs and beards, that channel.
No, I thought you were talking about my cat.
No. There's a guy named Fluff. His name is
fluffy
Fluff.
too.
But anyway, the point I'm trying to make though is that it's Pete Thorne is doing really well. I'm not sure you know who Pete Thorne is, but
I've heard of Pete Thorne.
Yeah, he's another YouTuber who's just crushing. Michael Nielsen's another guy who's really crushing, kind of on the gear side of it a little bit more.
Yeah, there's the dude who replaced Kirk Hammett's awful solo off the new Metallica song.
Exactly. There's so many. There's a lot of great and they're great and they're really good at what they do. That I'm not taking anything away from those guys at all. That's really cool what they do. I just, part of me feels like you're not making records, but you know what? I'll take that back because Michael Nielsen just made a record and released it, I think last year or something like that, and it's great. But you know what it is? It's just that I think that he's making music that's already been made. If that makes sense, it's well done, it's good, it's cool, it's got everything you want. You know what I mean? But it's also like been done a million times too. So, and I think that there's sort of a shrug of the shoulders that happens. It's like, cool. Well, when's your next video going to be? That's kind of what people care about. You know what I mean?
They're having to continually come up with new content.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Whether you made a great record or not, no one's going to care. You know what I mean? Pete Thorne's done a bunch of records. He's mostly making a living doing YouTube and like doing sideman gigs for various different pop artists. That's basically what he's doing. Like I'm going to go tour Europe with, this pop artist in France who no one here has ever heard of, but they pay the gig. I mean, there's a lot of those gigs to be had, and that's legit. That's making a living as a musician and the way he chooses to do it. Yep. I think that in all of our minds' eyes, like the idea of like the classic, my band gets signed and I'm going to go tour with, Kiss for 2 years or whatever, and then
that's not a reality at all.
It hasn't been for decades.
No, that doesn't mean that there aren't still, so we went and saw our buddy Mark and his band Navayan.
They're open for Hammerfall.
Open for Hammerfall.
Yeah, Navayan's great. Yeah,
that's a gig.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, that's true.
That's a great gig.
Yep, very, very cool.
Right?
Yep.
Like that's perfect, man. And
and then those guys are great too, and they're all owning the middle age thing. They're not trying to pretend like they're 20. You know what I mean?
Right. I think those guys do it very well. Yeah. Right.
The music's great too.
The music's great. Yeah. They've got the visual presentation's good.
Yep.
Songs are great.
They do it right. You know what I mean?
Nice guys. I think like all good stuff.
The challenges though is like you have to be able to replicate that. You have to be able to go tour and do like 15, 20 dates with that band to actually have any kind of impact in terms of building your own audience. You know what I mean? And you have to do that in conjunction with really promoting Spotify and YouTube and social media. You have to kind of do all. It's like a full court press you have to do.
Well, you got to get all that stuff like handled like first, right? You got to get that footprint.
I mean, all those things have to happen at the same time.
All those things have to, yeah.
You can't sit there and say, I'm just going to gig and then it's going to build an audience. Well, you will right. Sort of, but you have to. People don't engage with music that same way anymore. And it's weird too because if you're in the metal world, like the metal audience is older. It's like mid 30s up usually. That kind of thing. It's not like you're dealing with a bunch of 22-year-olds or 21-year-olds who are. There's a handful of those people. There's not like the vast propensity of people in their 20s are like massively in the metal. There's like that small percentage that are people who like rock and metal are more older people. You know what I mean?
So what it's going to take to get them out of the house. Yep. Is a little more,
and it's tough because they don't engage in social media as much as the people who are younger, and but rock and metal is not the music of people who are younger. So it's like a weird kind of the catch-22 that you kind of find yourself in, and a lot of bands that I think you and I think of as being new bands, but they really came out in like 2003.
Arch new, yeah.
It's like Firewind, this great new band that came out in 2005 or whatever it was. It's like 20 years ago.
2005, that's not a long time.
Yeah, that was 20 years ago. You know what I mean?
That's insane.
And so but that's some of the more successful metal bands have been in that mid 2000s, and I think that corresponds with they still had metal and rock was still at least somewhat in the vicinity of mainstream music at that point. There was still an audience that a record label would put put some money behind a band and try and put videos out and stuff. And there's not that bands don't do that now, but every band's got videos now. And YouTube is it's the same issue as like, going to play in a festival. There's like 50 other bands. How do you stand out? You know what I mean? It's tough. I mean, anything in the arts is difficult. If you're an actor, if you're a comedian, if you're a musician, if you're a painter, if you're whatever it might be, if you're an animator, it's not an easy life. Like choosing to be an artist is difficult. No one's going to hand you anything.
Right.
They're really much quicker to give you horrible like condemnation than they are to like praise you.
I mean, there's definitely, I think, some jealousy among those who have to work the 9 to 5.
I guess. I think so. And I think there's
some, not all.
There's like
there's
a sanctimoniousness
some people
about,
out there, yeah.
Sanctimoniousness about like, the money you make.
Or it's what do you do for a living? I teach guitar lessons. Okay, well, what else do you do?
That's what I do. It's like,
right.
Yeah. Well, that's ignorance too. That's part of that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it is. I think honestly, there's a thread in American culture. At least I don't know enough about other cultures to know if it's there or not. But that making money and being just a rich dude is like, or girl, is the most important thing in life. How much money you make, that's the most important thing. That's like the metric that we judge a successful life.
So that seems kind of like the opposite pole of the middle-aged dude. It's all about the gig. I got a gig. I'll take any gig.
Yeah,
I'll gig anywhere, anytime, for any amount of money in any place. I just want a gig.
The culture that those guys grew up in, that's what it meant to be a successful musician, was be gigging. You know what I mean? That's
I appreciate that, but so that's like the opposite pole, right, of what you're describing.
As far as like the making money part, you mean, or
just that all that matters is making money?
Yeah, well, there's a certain
in defense of middle-aged guy that's it's all about the gig, even though I still think that's that runs the risk of being kind of undignified. You know what? At least that person loves their art form and they're going to practice it. So in defense of that person,
it's either that or stay home and watch like Breaking Bad episode 22 or whatever.
Grey's Anatomy.
It's like, better than that, I guess. You know what I mean? As long as you think it's better than that. You know? It gives you a chance to pull out your cool amp that you never get to use and use your cool pedal that you never get to use. And,
you know what? I think you just made up came up with a great point, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe that dude just never gets to crank up his half stack at home.
Yeah. If for no other reason, that might be worth it for just that. You know what I mean? That's really fun.
Have a couple beers. You get to crank up your amp.
Rock out with your friends. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you just can't do it at home.
If there's nobody around, then who cares? As I'm still playing with my friends, you know what I mean? And I still can go to work the next day and say I had a gig last night.
I think we did it. I think we cracked. Well, I mean, so that's the hobbyist guitar player.
Yeah, I mean,
we just described.
The thing is,
which is great. I mean, I want people playing guitar all over the world.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that really the idea, though, of sort of like, I'm going to make a ton of, there's like, if you look at like Blabbermouth, you'll see it's almost like a obituary. There's a bunch of, not the band Obituary, but there's a bunch of bands calling it quits left and right. Like, oh, this guy stopped touring, he's leaving this band stopped, this band's over. And that's happening because it's so difficult to make any real money as a touring band, unless you're
now. Are these bands that are aging out, or are these bands that you wouldn't expect?
These are bands who are probably in their mid 30s, late 30s.
Oh, wow, okay.
They're not old dudes, but
not by any means.
But they're getting to the point where I'm probably married and I've got a wife and kids.
Yeah,
and I can't make enough money doing this to justify being gone as much as I'm gone. So I need to go and get an IT job or something. I'm going to go something that's not going to make me gone and going to make enough money to support a family. Because that's, you get to that point, you kind of get sick of being in a van or being in a small bus or RV.
Touring is a young man's game.
Yeah, and
no doubt.
Salami sandwiches backstage or whatever, and drinking beers. Like, you can only do that for so long before, and then you're not making any money either, or making very little money. Not enough to actually make a real living doing that. You know what I mean? And it's at some point there's just a clock that gets started, and then. If you're one of those bands that was lucky enough to have the right place, the right time, you had a label behind you, put enough money, you got enough to open up for enough big bands for long enough that you have a big enough audience. And let's say you can tour theaters now. You can do like 1,200, 1,500 seats. You can charge $200 a seat or whatever. You can make a decent living doing that with selling merch. You can actually make an okay living for everybody in that band if you can get to that level. The problem is that a lot of bands never reach that level. A lot of bands get stuck at the club level. And if you're at a club level, like, you're never going to get enough guarantee.
And I mean, how many clubs are even left?
Exactly. Right. And that's the thing that's also going away.
Yeah, that level itself has
and we already talked about earlier in this podcast,
yeah.
like, there's not like a vibrant club scene where people go out to see the bands. You know what I mean? That doesn't exist anymore. I mean, a lot of people don't even show up for openers. So if you're opening for someone else, you might have half the audience that would be there an hour later when the headliners come
on. Right, which is totally counterproductive, because if you're the opener, you want to play for that audience. You want to bring your crowd, but you also want to get some of their crowd.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Which is why you're doing that. You know what I mean? And it's tough. And I think also there's a certain indifference that a lot of audiences have about new artists. I don't know if you've talked about, even just talking about like, hey, I discovered this new band, Wings of Steel. They're really great. You guys should totally check them out. I kind of like Iron Maiden. It's like going like, but this other band's really great. Wouldn't it be cool to have Iron Maiden and this other new band that's really great? Like, I kind of like Pantera.
Dude, you have no idea how many times I've had like students ask me for band suggestions, and I'm like, yeah, check out this band, this band, this band, this band.
Yeah.
the next week comes up. So what did you think of insert band name here?
Yep.
I haven't checked them out yet.
Yeah, it's that. This is what us artists are up against. It's like there's this indifference about new music that people just don't give a shit. It's like,
which is crazy because like you don't even have to like sign up for Columbia House for 1 penny to get.
You can go on YouTube
CDs.
for free anytime right now.
Right.
Like, oh, here's the link. Just push the link right here. You can watch it. Like,
your phone's a computer.
it's literally, I gotta go like this and then load. I'm not doing that. You know what I mean?
Oh man, I've got to log off of my Xbox.
See, this is why musicians deserve so much respect. And I'll say all artists really, because every artist is in the same boat when it comes to that. If you're an actor, you'll take that freaking Grubhub background character gig and you'll brag to your friends that you got the gig. I'm shooting tomorrow. You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah, and you know what? I think for people that are working in acting, I think the online trolls are even worse for them.
well, the online trolls are terrible for everybody, but I mean,
For everybody,
but
right?
that-
Like there's art that isn't getting made because
trolls. Yeah.
because people just like to they think they're signaling that they're somehow deep thinkers by complaining about everything and ripping on stuff. But it's that trend.
Well, we
is a whole
talked
other
before
thing I
about
can't stand.
how much courage it takes to be an artist. Period. That's like one of those things it takes a lot of courage to be an artist, whatever art form it might be.
Yep.
So I think that what I'm trying to point to is there's a lot of headwinds in terms of being a musician, and I feel for a middle-aged guy who's going to play at a club for like 4 people. At the same time, it could be fun depending on how you look at it. If you sit there and say, "Hey, this is just me. I'm going to crank my amp up and have a great time," then if you have that attitude about it, I'm not looking for anything from this. That's totally fine. That's not a big deal. I think the dignified or not dignified, I think that there's a portion of the rock and roll world, well, really the pop culture world, that thinks that anybody over 40 doing anything in the arts is not dignified.
Or hell, anybody over 30.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Especially when it comes to
music was especially
right? It's a very youth
and also the
culture.
The middle-aged rock and roller dude is such a cliche now too. It's like like every rock and roller is like a 45 to 55, 65-year-old dude. You know what I mean? And
so I think you just hit the nail on the head, right? So to bring everything full circle, I can just say for myself, when it comes to any future gigs that I'm going to play, I need to be sure that it is not emblematic of that cliche. Like I'm never going to be that guy.
What guy are we talking about? Something the guy who's the undignified middle-aged guy?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, no one ever wants to be that guy.
I'm going to be dignified middle-aged guy. So whatever gigs that X Aegis performs,
yeah, they're going to be the right shows. Just like
it's going to be the right show, and it's going to be the right bill, and it's going to be we're going to put on the right kind of show.
In the meantime, we're going to do everything we can behind the scenes to build a band, and that's just what it is. That's the way music works now. It's not just a one thing anymore. And I think that I gotta play live thing.
Right. I don't feel that at all.
Well, that's got to be something that's like a holdover from like the 80s and 90s kind of approach, probably 70s too. Unless you're in a band that's got enough of an audience where you can go tour, and then it's just a matter of how sustainable is this. Is this something that I can keep doing, and I'm going to be able to like sustain myself doing this, or am I like taking a financial hit to do this? And then if I am, is that a short-term financial hit that's worthwhile, or is it
an investment, or is it a loss?
Exactly. Yeah. And you have to really kind of finish the tour and figure out whether that makes sense. And the question I would have is that, and I'm not suggesting I would ever like not, do what I'm doing, but it's like, is there a real bright future for rock and roll, or is it just an ever like dimming room with like less and less people interested? I mean, that's the question. I think everybody who's in rock is thinking that. Now the bands who are like, the Judas Priest and Scorpions, were like, we're going to be alive for 10 more years, so who cares?
Right.
You know what I mean? We're 80 years old. You know
we're
what I mean?
At the end of the road.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly. And we've already had our 50 years of success. Night, everybody. And Metallica's, it's the newer generation of bands. They've got to figure out what does success mean now. You know what I mean? Younger than like the Avenged Sevenfolds and those kind of guys. The younger bands than those guys, because those guys were even kind of grandfathered in a little bit, because there was still the remnants of the old system when they came into the scene.
True, which blows my mind too. Yeah. I can't believe that Avenged Sevenfold is like a legacy band.
They're probably the biggest band after Metallica. Once Metallica and that generation goes away, they're probably the last big. Them and like Five Finger Death Punch are probably the two biggest like metal bands. What I mean? After that, and there's a bunch of other bands. If you look at any like metal fest, there's like 50 bands. After like 10 down, you don't know who any of them are anymore. Which is not to say there's not a comment on the quality of those bands. It's just that there's so many bands. It's like impossible, and there's everything's so fragmented, you wouldn't just happen upon that band. You'd have to go look for that band to actually hear their music. You know what I mean? And that's what sucks now. It's like you can't just find a new band on the radio as they're playing this awesome new band. You know, you have to like somehow like just ass backwards stumble into this band and go, oh my God, these guys are great.
Yeah, well, you have to have, you know, Spotify or Apple Music. The algorithm suggests. I mean, that's how I found Lucifer.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is a great band.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you meant actual Lucifer. I'm sorry, I didn't realize.
Oh no, I found like actual Lucifer.
I thought you were like
a young age.
Like a cyber cafe, and the guy next to you was Lucifer. Hey,
no, I invited him to be my personal savior decades ago.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
We've been pals.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
but no, I mean the band Lucifer.
Yeah, I mean that's how you find any great new band nowadays.
Right.
And that's how people can find Ex Aegis. Just go on YouTube and check out our lyric videos for Head West or Not My Kind or Rising and stuff.
Or
like
go
that.
to our website
At
www.exaegisband.com.
And you can hear samples of the whole Ex Aegis debut record if you want to, and see you know how awesome it is, which is it's pretty awesome.
That's right.
And then, but I mean that's the thing. If you put a record out and you promote it, even if you're actively promoting it, you know, which we are, it's like it's hard. It's just it's hard to get people's attention. It really is. And even if you're great, and even if you are a great band, like we talked before, like here's this great band, they're exactly the genre you like. You would totally like this band. Go check them out. Here's where you can find them. And they go, yeah, I'll get to it.
Meh.
I'll get to it at some point. It's like that kind of indifference is this the headwinds that every artist is fighting against. You know, it's like just okay, and then you got to start doing all this soul searching. Like, why am I doing anything I'm doing?
Yes.
You know?
So there's so now a distinction I would like to make. Then you know, so even all of that be that as it may. Like, I'm never going to get tired of writing new music. I'm never going to get tired of making music with you.
Yeah, and also
Judith
releasing music and
you know,
and
Alex and
yep.
you know, like I'm never going to get tired of that. Like that is its own reward, and you know, so
you know, I think another way of looking at it too, and this is sort of how I've looked at it with Ex Aegis and Scott Allen Project, is that I'm doing that because it's something creatively I feel like I need to do. It's acting as a business card for my teaching practice. That's kind of the way I look at it. You know what I mean? It's like, if you like this music, here's me playing. This is all the stuff you can hear me doing. This is stuff I write. This is the kind of music I'm into. Yeah. You know, if you like that, you can come and learn how to play for me.
Well, just like like you just said, it's something creatively I need to do.
Yeah. Right? But it also has the functionality of this is going to drive people towards my teaching practice. You know what I mean? That's another part of why that's being done. So it's not just throwing it out in the ether saying, okay, this is just here, blah, there's a bottle in the water with, you know, my little note in it.
Yeah. So for me, you know, the gig for its own sake isn't something that I creatively need to do.
Yeah, yeah.
Like making and playing and creating music is something that I creatively need to do. So that's a distinction.
And it's not that it's playing live. It's just that it's got to be the right situation. And
you know what? But like playing a live show when it's great is really great. Yep. I mean, I get it. It's a rush. It's awesome.
Yep. You feel like a god on earth, actually.
Yeah, the interaction with the crowd is great. Yep. I mean, there's so many great. I mean, we could fill up a whole other podcast of like best gig memories. Yeah, right. Exactly. Maybe that's another podcast topic.
And worst gig memories too.
You know what? Well, there we go. I think we might just have to. There's a future topic, folks.
So here's what I would say, though, in wrapping it up, is that you got to just do what you feel is right for you, regardless. I think worried about whether or not it's dignified or not, that's for every person to make that call. You know what I mean? It's hard to say. Maybe just for you, just having a loud amp behind you and playing with your friends is the entire reason you're doing it. So that who cares about? It's not someone else's outsider's opinion about that's not dignified.
Right.
It's not for them to say. You know what I mean? And,
yeah, totally. And I hope nobody listening thinks that I'm not ripping on anybody. I just
well, we could rip on Cobain a little bit. Jack White.
Totally. Well, luckily Cobain's not playing any more gigs.
That's true. Unfortunately, there is an opportunity.
Although, you know what, dude? This has me dismayed. The latest Paramount Plus commercial features Scott Stapp.
Well, it could be worse. I mean, I guess it could be worse.
Well, I mean, it'd be hard to get worse.
I don't think there's I don't think there's a future. Okay, well, for number one, I got his back because he's a Scot. So I got to.
No, dude, not all Scots are created equal.
He's in the club. He's in the club.
You're awesome. My cousin Scott is awesome.
Yeah, there's a lot of other good Scots.
There's the Stapps out there, though.
Yeah, I mean, but I don't see a world where Scott Stapp is going to like suddenly blow up again and become a giant.
I know. We're getting there's going to be like this wave of like late '90s, early 2000s.
It'll happen. You know?
But I'll tell you what, though, on the new Paramount Plus commercial, they do play the cock-a-doodle-doo lick, right? It's our
world famous Mark Tremonti cock-a-doodle-doo.
Yeah,
lick.
dude, it's just a clip of that song. Like, I think it's like Patrick Stewart. They have all of the
CBS Paramount people,
all the Paramount characters, right? And like Captain Picard's like, engage, and then up above the mountain comes Scott Stapp and Mark Tremonti going, cock-a-doodle-doo, cock-a-doodle-doo.
Life affirming.
It's horrifying.
It's life affirming is what it is. They're taking us all higher.
I guess that's one way to think about it. That's totally opposite than the way I think about it. But that's okay.
So thank you for letting us ramble here towards the end. Guys, I appreciate you listening to the Rock Guitar Confidential Podcast with Brian and Scott. Please make sure to go check out our band website at www.xaegisband.com. What was that again, Ryan?
That's www.exaegisband.com.
And make sure to find our links to social media on there for our Instagram, which is instagram.com/xaegisband. It's hard to say. Facebook.com/xaegisband and Twitter.com, or I guess it's X now, the xaegisband. I'm still going to call it Twitter. I'm not going to give.
Well, again, Elon
Musk
changed it to X after we released our album.
Exactly.
So
the Aegis he just left silent. The Aegis is silent. But, anyway, thank you for listening, guys. We'll catch you next time.
Peace.